So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Ecologies of Justice Conference. It is really wonderful to see so many of you, many familiar faces, many new faces here joining us. And as many of you know, this is the second conference on this topic we've hosted. And if you didn't participate last year, we encourage you to learn more and check out some of what you missed in last year's conference webpage, prisonguardandjustice.org. We'll post that to the chat. And this year, before we get started, this is our first session, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank the tremendous organizing committee we've had that really picked up from the momentum at the end of last year's conference. And we've been meeting since the fall to bring this all together for you. And I'd just like to express my deep appreciation and gratitude for all of the work of our amazing organizing committee, who has been such an inspiring and dedicated group that's contributed to different aspects of this planning. The committee includes Amanda Berger, Kelly Bush, Danny Jock, William Jett, Gunnar Johnson, Elizabeth Lara, Grady Mitchell, Robert Ortiz, Raquel Pinderhughes, Sean Taylor, and Shay Zwerver. And this year's theme that we put together is on ecologies of justice, and it focuses on the possibilities for creating new forms of community and interconnection, specifically connecting people and communities to the wider environment and ecologies. And as you can see from our website, if you haven't checked it out yet, we encourage you to check out the conference website and read more about the theme and read more about each of the sessions that we'll be having. And so just a couple of logistical details before we get started. We're going to be meeting here. I hope many of you will be repeat attendees. We'll be here each Thursday at the same time for a 90-minute session. So put it on your calendar. In the email you receive, there are easy links you can just click to add to your Google Calendar, Outlook calendar. We have, like I mentioned, this exciting lineup of topics and speakers, and we hope that you'll attend as many as you can. If you can attend any session using the same link, so it will be the same link throughout the conference. But anyways, you'll receive email reminders to join each week. And like this week, we'll be doing abbreviated introductions, but you can find full introductions on the Ecologies of Justice webpage. Now, most sessions will involve a presentation and time for some kind of conversation or Q&A. We really encourage you to participate in these conversations and Q&A. Different sessions will have different ways of getting your feedback, but I encourage you, should you be encouraged, to unmute yourself or type questions directly in the chat as they're coming up, or whatever other format the presenters are asking of you. And if you'd like to continue the conversation and be in touch with presenters and attendees after, you can add your name to the Ecologies of Justice website, the Stay Updated area. And there you'll be added to an email list that you can send emails or post emails on news announcements, events, or resources related to the topics of sustainability, prisons, and communities. And again, like most things, you can add your name there. Check out the schedule at ecologiesofjustice.org. Now, some of our sessions will be recorded, and we will announce at the beginning any sessions that are being recorded. And this is one of them. So this session is being recorded. And at the same time, we really do encourage you to attend these events live, as your questions and participations are really vital to the presenters and to the sessions. So at this point, without any further introductions, I will turn it over to Kelly Bush from Evergreen State College and Sustainability in Prisons Project, who will introduce the first session on ecological conservation programs in prisons. So thanks, Kelly, and thanks to today's presenters.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for all your work gathering us together today. My name is Kelly Bush. As Matt said, I work at the Evergreen State College. I'm co-director of Sustainability in Prisons Project. I use she, her pronouns, and I want to turn it over to introduce our other speakers today. So I'm going to turn it over first to Karen Hall. Could you introduce yourself, talk about the work that you do, and if you're comfortable, share your pronouns.
Sure. My name is Karen Hall. I go by she, her pronouns, and I work with the Institute for Applied Ecology. I'm the program director for ecological education there, and the work we do is largely sagebrush in prisons, although we do have a desert tortoise program, and we also work with some endangered butterflies. We'll be talking a little bit about that today.
Okay, maybe I'll go next. I'm Stacy Moore, she, her pronouns with Institute for Applied Ecology, and I'm an ecological educator with Institute for Applied Ecology. And I've been working with the Sustainability in Prisons project since about 2012, I think.
Carolina, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yes, my name is Carolina Landa. I go by she, her pronouns. I used to be a butterfly technician in one of the SPP programs, and I currently work at the Office of the Corrections Ombuds in the Office of the Governor. And at the office, we have oversight to the 12 prisons in the state of Washington and also the 12 work releases. And we take complaints and try to pursue remedy for people that are currently incarcerated.
Thank you, Carolina. Liz, are you comfortable going next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. I was a butterfly technician many years ago. I currently work as the outreach and administrative coordinator for Fair Start. Fair Start's a nonprofit organization that our mission is to help those who have barriers to employment by providing them with a skill. And so that's my job is to work. I work with the consulting department, and our job is to help organizations worldwide create their own job training programs, either scale it up or create new ones. So nice to be here.
Thank you, Liz. And last but not least, Emily Passarelli.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Passarelli. Thanks for having me. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Sustainability in Prisons project program and outreach manager. So I get to manage some of the peer-led education programs that we do. And yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right, thanks, Emily. So bear with me one moment here while I switch to share my screen. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we plan to have our session today. Can everyone see my screen all right? Excellent. So first, we're going to talk about what are ecological conservation programs, what do we mean by that, and talk a little bit about the organizations that are here today representing our program models. And then we're going to talk about the experience. The bulk of our time will actually be hearing from Liz and Carolina about their experience in the programs. So you'll get a brief introduction on what do we mean by ecological conservation, some overview of our model, and then more time to hear about the experience. At the very end, we want to leave time to hear any questions you might have, but to also have a facilitated discussion about how we might improve this work going forward. So before we dive in, again, what do we mean by ecological conservation programs? Both of the organizations that are presenting here today, the Sustainability in Prisons Project and the Institute for Applied Ecology, offer a wide variety of programs. We're today presenting a narrow focus on ecological conservation programs. By this, we mean programs that include native plants, animals, and ecosystems, and that every program includes experiential education, academic education, things such as workshops, readings, seminars. So that's what we're here to focus on today. Know that there are a lot of other programs each organization is offering. The values we bring to the work. So we really are founded in the idea that everyone deserves access to education and nature. These should be basic human rights. We are invested in shared transformation and hope. This isn't about, us going in and somehow, bringing education to people that don't already have some form of education. It's a learning exchange, and that we learn from them as much as they learn from us, hopefully. We're working to address social justice and environmental crises. So we've got these two major issues around mass incarceration, climate change, and other environmental crises, and we're trying to find ways to simultaneously address both. We're working to empower leaders and environmental stewards to diversify the environmental movement, to have it be more inclusive, representative, and relevant, to bring science education to a population that is typically underserved. So that's a little bit about some of the values that we bring to the work. I also want to talk about what we are not. We are not founded on the idea that this is a source of cheap labor, that we're going into prisons to use people for their labor. We are mindful that the system that we're working within is not functioning as a rehabilitative system, but we are trying to bring programs into a setting where we understand, based on talking with folks both during incarceration and post-release, that our work is wanted. We're not looking to greenwash or sustain prisons. I'm mindful that the name of the organization that I work for, Sustainability in Prisons Project, can be confusing. We're not looking to sustain the system as it exists. We're also not saying that, oh, because we've brought butterflies and plants into prisons, we've somehow fixed this broken system. So I just wanted to be clear about that. Our work is intended to reduce stress. It's not meant to increase stress in this already stressful environment. We are not focused on cost savings. Some of our programs do result in cost savings through reduced resource use, but that is not the focus of our work. It is really to bring empowering education to people. And last, we don't mandate participation by incarcerated people. We know that we cannot change currently the structure, the fact that they are incarcerated, but we aim to be a choice during their incarceration. Nobody is required to participate in our programs. So I mentioned earlier that we want to, at the end, have a facilitated discussion. We recognize that, like, as I say, these programs that we offer are not perfect. They're not on their own making the system rehabilitative or therapeutic for the population. We know that there's a lot that we could do to improve our work, and we want to have a discussion about how we do that. So we want to hear from you about how we may advance empowering education and training, how we can improve post-release opportunities, how we can together broaden inclusion in the environmental movement, and how we can better support currently and previously incarcerated people as environmental and community leaders. So we'll revisit these questions later, but I wanted to put them out here because I want to welcome you to, if you have thoughts during our presentation, to put them in the chat. Or to maybe jot a note down so that we can talk about it more at the end of the session. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to just briefly to Sustainability in Prisons Project. We don't have time. We didn't want to spend our time going into all that we do or how it works, but I wanted to give you a brief overview, and then our colleagues with Institute for Applied Ecology are going to do the same. So again, the organization case study we're looking at now is for Sustainability in Prisons Project. We operate out of Washington State. Our mission is to empower change by bringing science, nature, and environmental education into prisons. Our current ecological conservation programs are Taylor's Checker Spot Butterfly. We have 3 different conservation nurseries. We work with a shrub steppe ecosystem, Salish lowland prairies, and we grow plants for decommissioned Western Washington trail sites. We also work with the state listed Western pond turtle, and we're just beginning a new program for acoustic monitoring of birds here in Washington State. Some other programs that are similar, but we don't necessarily consider in the same category as ecological conservation, are beekeeping, gardening, composting, Roots of Success, which is an environmental literacy curriculum. They are presenting at another session, so I'll let them talk more about that wonderful course. We previously had a program working with domestic sheep for wild bighorn sheep conservation, work with an Oregon spotted frog, and emergent vegetated mats. So that gives you a sense of, these are all programs that are aimed at working with native plants or animals to help with either ecosystem recovery or population recovery. We work in all 12 prisons in Washington State with folks of all gender identities and at multiple custody levels, mostly folks that are considered minimum security or medium security. We are an education and training program. That's at the heart of what we do. So we have a bunch of different modes of delivering education. A lot of our work is about the hands-on experience of working with different organisms, caring for different organisms. We do provide workshops, seminars, education modules, which are like education lessons or chapters. We bring in books and articles to enhance all that learning. I'm really excited. We recently made a breakthrough with the Evergreen State College where our program is hosted so that we can award academic credit to participants during incarceration. This is transferable credit that will help them toward a degree if that's what they want to pursue. For those who don't want to pursue higher education, we offer certificates that can be translated for use on resumes. We provide recommendation and reference letters. In short, we really try to continue to be part of somebody's network post-release. We don't want our interactions with them, our support of them to end when they release. There are lots of partners involved in order to make this work. First and foremost, currently and previously incarcerated people, they advise us on our work. They provide input. They let us know what they want to learn more about. And we try to target the service we're providing based on their needs. We also partner with corrections staff who find these programs stress relieving as well. Academic organizations to help grant the credit and to ensure that we're delivering good, sound education. And then loads of conservation organizations that initially weren't sure that this work could be done in prisons, and now are asking a lot more questions about social justice issues, which has been a really great change to see evolve in the 10 years of doing this work. What's next? We are working on developing more of what we're calling education portfolios. These are the structure around the programs that we deliver that allow us to grant academic credit. So we're building more and more of those, which is really exciting. And then we're also starting to work on an initiative for reentry conservation apprenticeships. This is placing folks post-release if they want to, offering them an opportunity to be placed with a host employer that works in the environmental field, a natural resource agency or a conservation organization, somewhere between a 1 to 3 year placement with an shared understanding that we are investing in professional development and reentry support during that time. So that's in its early stages, just something we're starting to work on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Karen Hall, to tell you a little bit more about Institute for Applied Ecologies model.
Hello, give me just a second to get the PowerPoint going and we'll go. All right, you can see in presenter view, okay? All right, terrific. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Karen Hall. I'm with the Institute for Applied Ecology. This is IAE's basic mission, and I have to say the program for ecological education really supports that mission, particularly through restoration work that we do, made possible largely through the sagebrush in prisons and the various other projects that we have going. But in not just supporting restoration there, but also through our educational efforts, we're helping to build healthy interactions with the natural world, which also meets with the basic mission of IAE. And I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Stacy Moore at this point. And I should say Stacy Moore is the former program director here. And as she mentioned earlier, she just has a long history of work within the Sagebrush in Prisons program with SPP. And we're just pleased to have her around and learn from her.
Great, thank you, Karen. So IAE runs 3 main programs: the Sagebrush in Prisons Project, Mojave Desert Seed Bulking Program, and Plants for Captive Rearing Endangered Butterflies. And the species and ecosystems that we work with, we raise sagebrush to help the greater sage-grouse habitat throughout the American West. We are growing plants to help the Mojave Desert tortoise habitat. And we also work with 3 different butterfly species. We're growing Plantago for Taylor's checker spot butterfly, Viola adunca for Oregon's silver spot butterfly, and we're growing Kincaid's lupin for the Fender's blue butterfly. And on this map, you can see some of the areas where we are working with prisons. With the Sagebrush program, we're working in 5 different states: Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, and California. For our butterfly programs, we're working with 2 prisons in Oregon. And for the desert tortoise, we're working with a federal prison in California. And if you look at the table to the left, you can see the numbers of plants that we've grown for the sagebrush program. And in total, we've grown over 3 million sagebrush and bitterbrush plants to help the greater sage grouse. Education and training is a really important part of any of these programs. And Institute for Applied Ecology, we start our education programs a month or 2 before the adults in custody even start sowing seeds. And I can't stress enough the importance of starting your education programs early. For example, when we approached adults in custody and staff at some prisons and said, we want you to grow sagebrush. And people were looking around and going, wait, there's sagebrush everywhere. Why would we want to grow sagebrush? But once you explain how wildfires are changing the habitat, and there's been such a loss of habitat for the greater sage grouse, and that we need these native plant plugs out in the landscape, then both the staff and adults in custody understand why they're doing this. And then they get excited about the programs, and then they get buy-in to the programs. And I will say your prison programs will be much more successful if you get that excitement and buy-in from both staff and adults in custody. For some of our workshops, we bring outside professionals into the prison to give workshops, and the adults in custody love people from the outside coming in to share with them. So they're very thankful. And people from the outside coming into the prison often have a lot of preconceived ideas about prisons and adults in custody. But once they come in, they go, well, these people are kind of like me. And I can say that our speakers have said that the adults in custody have been the best audience they have ever had. So it's been really successful. We've had seminars, such as a BLM person gave a seminar on conflict resolution and natural resources. For our technicians, we give hands-on vocational learning. We do, as Kelly mentioned, the education modules where IEE and SPP at Evergreen have created hard copy curriculum. And that was really important during COVID when we couldn't go into the prisons, but we could still reach out and engage in learning. We give the adults in custody templates where they can do data collection. And again, that gets them very excited. And we use, as staff, we use their data later. At the end of the programs, we have a really fun ceremony, and we give the inmates certificates. On the backside, it lists the tasks that they've completed, and we hope that they can use those with employers. And it's really important that we support them with letters of recommendation or support. So education and training, vital part of all these programs.
Okay. And so we, like SPP, we partner with a wide array of individuals to make this program happen. You know, primarily the funders come to mind first because they make it possible. Certainly, we derive a lot of our funds from the Bureau of Land Management and from the Department for Environmental Quality or the Abandoned Minelands program in Wyoming. But, you know, we work with a host of other state agencies and even local agencies to make it happen. We certainly partner with people to bring in education into the various places that we work. My goodness, I think there's kind of no one that we won't partner with to make this happen and make the program better. That's just the truth. And, you know, also the other part of this is, I should say, we even partner with ourselves. So one aspect of IAE, or one program that is in IAE that we utilize their services of, is the plant materials portion of IAE. This is a group that is formed to produce the plant materials that are needed to restore native habitats. And we certainly rely on them for advice and often for even supplies for the things that we do. We work with BLM offices really throughout the states that we work. They help to provide the seed, not just sagebrush seeds, but as Stacy mentioned, we also grow bitterbrush and other associated plants occasionally as needed too. So partners is the way that this program is actually made to happen.
Karen, can I add one thing just because I think it's cool?
Sure.
Two of our grants, a past one and a current one, we're partnering with the prison program and local schools. And I think that's been really neat because the inmates grow the plants and then the school children actually take these plants and plant them out in the landscape. So that's been a really fun partnership.
Yeah, great. Thanks for reminding me. Great. All right, so one thing, you know, whoops, did I just end it? Yes, I did. Let's see, let me get back to that slide. Pardon my glitch, one wrong move, and there you go. One thing that we think about often is, you know, what would our program look like in the future? What are we going to focus on? And one thing that we would love to do is to find partners to help us build that path from incarceration to employment. And of course, we realize that that involves us really reflecting on ourselves. How can we hire formerly incarcerated people to help this program? And I believe that's a reality in the future for us, and not too distant future too. We, of course, still want to continue to build these really deep relationships with nature so that everyone can have healthier lives, not only the adults in custody, but everybody concerned with the program. We believe that is the foundation to success of IAE's mission overall. Of course, we want to continue to build those really strong relationships with prison officials. And this, of course, helps to lead to their buy-in. But like Kelly had mentioned earlier, we recognize that we're working in a system that is far from humane and far from the best system that it can be. But if we continue along the path of developing these stronger relationships in conferences like this and with continued discussion, I think we can get a little closer to building systems of incarceration that are better than what we currently have. And we want to continue those synergistic relationships with partners for that very reason. And so we're very, very happy to be part of this conference going forward, and I'm looking forward to getting to know more of you better and better as the years go on. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen and Stacy. So with that, I want to turn it over to Carolina and Liz to hear a bit more about their experience in the program. So both Carolina and Liz mentioned that they were part of the Taylor's Checker Spot Butterfly program. That program is hosted at Mission Creek Correction Center just outside of Belfair, Washington. And so I'm going to turn it over to them, and we can start with a few facilitated questions. I wanted to let Carolina and Liz know, in case you didn't see it in the chat, someone was asking, what is a butterfly technician? I think that the questions we've already got lined out for you will help answer Elizabeth's question, but also just wanted you to know that that's in the chat, and that's definitely for you all. So I don't know which one of you prefers to start, but the first question we had is, why did you choose to be in the butterfly program? And can you talk a little bit about what is the Taylor's Checker Spot Butterfly program? I think, okay, Carolina,
you want me to go, Carolina?
You go first, Liz.
Okay. When I first arrived at Mission Creek Correction Facility, I knew that I had to have a job because I didn't want to be a burden on my family. So it happened that there was this huge poster on the wall that was asking for individuals interested in being a part of the butterfly program to submit a resume and application. And that really spoke to me because I've always been a proponent of, saving our environment, recycling, all of those things. I volunteered for a lot of other organizations prior to that. And so that to me was really important. And the other part of it was that I knew that being a part of this program would help me when I was released from prison. It would show something that I did something with my time there, and that I learned something new, and that it would be beneficial for me. And so tailored checker spot butterflies are on the federally endangered species list. They are part of the DOC and SPP program as a collaboration between the Oregon Zoo, SPP, Evergreen, JBLM. And the idea is to relocate these tailored checker spot butterflies from their current home, which was on an artillery field, to a new location so that we could continue to expand and grow and take them off the federally endangered species. So our job was to raise these butterflies. Sorry, it's been a long time since I had talked about this. Everything from larva to breeding to making sure that we had enough larvae to take out into the field and continue to develop that. So anyway. But I really enjoyed being part of the program.
That was a great description, Liz. So yeah, what really called my attention was when you get to institution, there's very limited jobs that you can do. And most commonly they are somewhere working in the kitchen or doing laundry or doing porter. And none of those jobs are, not to speak down to them, but they're not something that you are going to get anything really from. And so for me, when I saw it advertised on the kiosk, it really called my attention because they were actually going to do an interview and do just a regular process, just like you do on the outside. And so I thought that was something really different and really something you don't see often, because all of those other jobs that I said, institution jobs, are just pretty much where you are put on a list, and then once it's your number is up, or you're next on the list, then you just get into one of those other institution jobs. So this is actually a process that I had that was new and different, and it was very called my attention because I was actually going to apply for something and go through an interview process, and it was very, very different from any of the other institution jobs.
Thank you. Is there anything that either of you want to add about the day-to-day experience of caring for the butterflies? What can you give us a glimpse of what that's like? What the experience is?
Yeah. So there's different cycles and seasons, especially with the Taylor's checker spot. It can go into a diapause where they can go to sleep for maybe 2 cycles or sometimes not. But so the winter is a little slower, and in those times we just really tend to them by making sure that the temperature is correct, while they're in diapause. And then during the full season, though, we would go through a whole cycle from waking up to larvae to then releasing some larvae on the different sites, and then also and then going through the whole cycle again, right? From day to day, we would be out there for 7 to 8 hours, and it was just completely outside of the institution, so outside of the fence, the barbed wire fence, and it really gave me a reprieve from inside institution chaos that can happen right inside of prisons. And so we were right outside, and as we know, a lot of prisons are built in a really remote setting away from cities. So we were surrounded by trees, by the forest. It was just really nice out there, and we were in a glass, greenhouse, and there's just something about working with, nature and life species, right? Like it's different, and it's very therapeutic. So yeah, that's a lot of what I got out of it.
Yeah, I think we called it our sanctuary because we were away from the noise and the drama of what was going on outside. And it really gave us an opportunity working so closely with the other technicians. We really got to learn about each other. We had to learn how to communicate differently because everyone is coming from a different place and at different levels of experience. And just really working, we really had fun. I mean, during our breeding season, we had to come up with different methods to get our butterflies to breed. We played music, we put them out in the sun. We got to grow flowers right across the road from us. Another group at Mission Creek was growing vegetables. So we got to go out there and tend vegetables. So it was really a nice, like Carolina said, a nice break from whatever was going on outside. And we really could work on who we were and developing and fixing what we needed to fix for ourselves out there.
Thank you. I feel like you both already touched on this, but I want to ask the question in case there's something more you want to add. Did it matter that you were working with living things? And if so, is there anything more you want to say about that? I mean, I think you both touched on it beautifully.
Yeah, it's just very therapeutic, right? There's a lot of research that's, around this. And also, I think I remember, we'd go really early in the morning. Sometimes, we'd head out around 7 or 8, and it was just so quiet. You could literally hear the larvae like eating on the plantago, right? And it was just very therapeutic. And how Liz was saying, it gave us time to really think, about what we needed to work right within ourselves. When you get that kind of peace and reprieve, it really allows you to make those connections. And also just how Liz was saying, because it was a small team of certain women, right, then it allowed us to build community with each other because we would see each other every day. And I think that's also a very important component.
Yeah, and initially it was, you were a little hesitant because these butterflies are very delicate, but they're actually very resilient. And so being able to hand feed a butterfly for the very first time was an experience. And, and you learn patience because they are animals. We, unlike talking to a person, we can give a person instructions and get a response and know exactly what's going on. But when you're working with animals, you really have to anticipate what's going on. And again, just really required a lot of patience. So.
Thank you. Can you talk more about the experience of working with partners? So, you both touched on there are all these other organizations involved, Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, all these other folks, because there's a whole other side of this work, right, which is occurring out in the field on recovery sites. Can you talk more about, the interaction with different partners who would come in to visit the program?
Yeah, for me, it was really, it really served me well to start to build this network. I focused really heavily on areas of success for reentry happen around building a network for yourself, right? For people that are coming out of incarceration. And so working with other partners and networking with other people started to give me that jump off ability, right? As I was meeting people, these were people that were now becoming part of my network. And it gave me an opportunity to really start to build the plans, the goals that I wanted for myself from incarceration to reentry to regular life again. And so I definitely experienced really good outcomes from being able to start to communicate with people in that way. And also, these are really the people that helped me once I started going into reentry, releasing. I really reached out to SPP and a lot of things that I needed. They were there to support. And I think overall the experience as we're meeting all these people, it's not the same occurrence that happens, with people that are inside the institution. We really get to talk to, people from the Oregon Zoo, US Fish and Wildlife. This is not a natural occurrence that you would think that would happen in a prison. And also just the trust, They are trusting us to work with an endangered species and then actually have these great outcomes, that come from the work that we collaboratively all do. I think that's also just something very beneficial that I experienced.
Yeah, and Carolina is right. I mean, we teach our students at Fair Start that you surround yourself with what we call our power team. And so these individuals from these organizations can be considered part of your power team, so that when you are released, you have, a network of people that you can reach out to help you move forward with whatever you need, whatever you want to accomplish once you're released. And, prior to being incarcerated, I did a lot of marketing and worked as a business operation. So I was used to working with a lot of different groups. It was just challenging in this environment because you couldn't just pick up the phone or you couldn't just send an email. So you had to figure out different ways to communicate and with these individuals. So it really taught you to think outside the box. There was a lot of we had to handwrite everything. There's no, wasn't till later on that we actually had computers. I had to handwrite my resume to apply for these jobs. So it really makes you appreciate things that, some of the things that we just really take for granted these days and how we communicate, that you really had to adjust how that worked in prison life. And it was nice to have conversations with experts, being able to ask those questions and really learn more about the work that we were doing from the experts in the field. So.
Thank you. Carolina touched on something that I just wanted to add to. So, with this program, Taylor Sugar Spot Butterfly, it was really a biologist with Department of Fish and Wildlife who believed in the powerful impacts, the many powerful impacts that could come from this program. Her name is Mary Linders. And I know at the time there were a lot of folks in the conservation community who thought, oh my gosh, you can't, bring a federally endangered butterfly into a prison and be successful. Carolina touched on just how successful they are. They are incredibly good at this work, as I'm sure most people on this webinar would expect, right? But I do want to remind us that that was not the idea when it first started. And in fact, folks like this biologist really had to kind of stick their neck out to say, no, we think that this program can be really successful and that this is the kind of thing we should be doing to reach folks that don't otherwise get access to working with these organisms. And the program at Mission Creek is incredibly successful. I mean, the conservation community has been blown away by their results. I'm not so surprised, but I get to work with them fairly regularly. So I just wanted to share that bit that, not only is this program, working, but they're incredibly successful at it. They often are contributing to protocols and procedures and saying, hey, what about if we adjusted this or that? We do get to do this work as a team. I'm mindful that there are a lot of power dynamics in prisons that we have to be aware of. I don't want to pretend that they don't exist. And at the same time, to the best of our ability, we're always trying to make it as inclusive as possible so that folks really feel like they have the opportunity to contribute. And we, as a result, have worked together to improve protocols and procedures around how to raise this fairly finicky butterfly. So wanted to just add that. So that's the successes. Let's talk about the challenges, because this work is not without its challenges. it can be really hard. So I wonder if Carolina and Liz, if you can tell us about the challenges that you faced during your time in this program.
Yeah, so when I started the program was just starting, and that was back in, I think I got to the institution right when they were just finishing up the greenhouse. And then I got to be one of the first people, and that was back in 2011, 12, somewhere right around there. And there was, I think, like how Kelly was already touching based on how Mary Lenders really had to push, right? And the same in an institution is you bring a brand new program in, and there was several officers that just thought like, this is a joke, right? Like, what are you doing? So then there was just a big resistance of course, not being informed, not knowing, right? Which shows up in these ways. And so sometimes the officers, would create extra barriers, right? To already trying to just, we had to, of course, there's a lot of policy that exists within DOC that I think naturally when you bring in programs like this can create extra barriers. And then if you have that on top of like, people that are just not well informed about the programs, I think at the very beginning, that's a lot of what I saw. Over time, I think DOC has learned, they've seen the success of the program, so it has gotten better. But of course, that was a lot of what I saw at the beginning. Some officers, were uninformed, ignorant of, what the program consisted of, what exactly were we doing, and of course the extra, policies that exist. If you go outside of a, of the gated fence, then you have to do strip searches, right? Those are extra barriers, right? That can be dehumanizing. And so those were a lot of the barriers, I think, at first, that I really wanted to focus on and really be specific with. I think back at, there is certain policies, like for example, one of the partners is JBLM, but for releases that happen there, we were not allowed to go there because there is policy that exists that, people that are incarcerated or that have a criminal record cannot go on site. So then there was, though, at first we really tried to do this conference at Nisqually, and it finally happened. And I think, a lot of us went on that, and that was like a big success. And then it finally happened to Scatter Creek, one of the other sites that is not on a army base. Then that finally happened for the women as well. And so those little challenges that take time, and it's not something that just happens within a prison. It is gradual change where people really have to push for things to happen like that.
Thanks for adding those bits, Carlene. I just wanted to just add a little bit. So, Carlene is referring to that we have pre-COVID, this is one of the things I'm just realizing I'm missing so much right now. We were able to bring the incarcerated participants in the butterfly program to a meeting that was all about Taylor's checker spot recovery. So it was all the experts on Taylor's checker spot recovery. I remember the first meeting and Carlina was involved in one of those first meetings. And I remember it was a little bit like, oh, this is, there was a little bit of a like, oh, there's these folks from the prison coming. And there was this little bit of a, I don't know, a little bit of awkwardness, I suppose, in the air, right? And as I got to attend those meetings in subsequent years, it just was no thing. It was like, we're all part of this recovery effort. The incarcerated folks that are doing this butterfly work are going to present on their piece of it. So they present at the conference. As she says, we were successful in getting folks onto a release site so they could participate in seeing that other piece of it that happens in the field. And yes, I couldn't agree with her more from my end of it, from my experience end of it, also very challenging to make that happen because these systems were not designed for that kind of thing. So anyway, I appreciate that you raised both of those, Carlina. Liz, do you want to add about challenges?
No, I think Carolina really covered a lot of it, and basically, besides just the rules that we had to adhere to, is really changing the mindset of the officers that we work with that don't prejudge who we are because we are incarcerated. And so the assumption is always that we're going to do something wrong versus this is an opportunity for us to do something good. And so fighting that battle and having them put more barriers in front of you actually made us stronger, because we jumped through whatever barrier they had because this was important to us and this was meaningful and this was important work. And so eventually over time, I think we changed their thought process and the idea that these programs are really beneficial and not for the incarcerated, for those who are incarcerated, as well as everyone outside of these systems. So it's come a long way since then. Thank
you. So like we talked about at the beginning, we know these programs are not perfect. We know there's a lot of work still to be done. And I wonder, if you dream big, if there are no limitations, you're not limited in resources, the system doesn't exist as it does now, what changes would you make to improve these programs?
Well, I definitely think the programs themselves, having been in the system for a number of years, is working really well. And I think we're really opening up these programs to a lot more individuals. I think where we fall behind is, unless you're the type of person like Carolina, and myself, who knew that we're going to prepare for what our life is like after we're released. We build those connections. We became a part of this program. But for other individuals, that's not necessarily their thought process. And so, how we help our students at First Start is that we help them get those jobs. And what I would like to see is, like you had mentioned in your presentation earlier, that we're getting to a point where we can connect the individuals who participate in the program with the organizations that are supporting it, so that hopefully once they're released, they can step into a role that they've already spent time preparing for. So, because that and it's difficult because logistically, how do you help all these individuals with doing a resume, practicing interviewing, having access to these jobs? How do that? It's just logistically really difficult, but that would sort of be the next step in really kind of closing the loop, so to speak, in this process.
Yeah, and I think Liz is absolutely correct. I think really for me, it's always been from when I first started the program and then started to have conversations with the intern that was Dennis Aubrey at the time, and I really started to have this conversation. Well, what can I do with this though, right? Like there should be something that I should be able to directly, right, take these skills and do an outside program. And so, and then of course, at the time, it was limited. It wasn't completely streamlined yet. And so then, but then that got me into the process of like, well, then I'm going to pursue college, right? And this is what I'm going to do to build my skills. But it's like Liz says, not right. We need to make it more streamlined for people to have successful reentry, because it's not something about like, nobody's the exception. We just have to provide the resources for people to have success. And it can easily, not easily, but it can happen as long as we work towards that goal, knowing that, these people need to be able to have access to resources and envision something bigger for themselves, right? And this is one component by offering programs like this in a prison setting, but how do we take that further to the next step?
Thank you. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you did after you left prison and what you're doing now. Carolina, you touched a little bit on your education journey. It's a pretty awesome story. I wonder if you can say more. And Liz, your journey is also really impressive, and the organization you work for is doing such amazing work. So I'm excited about this bit. Can you tell us about, what it was like right after release and how you navigated that and what you're doing now?
Yeah. So after I had mentioned I had this conversation, right, with Dennis, I really started to have the conversations of, I want to pursue college, then I want to be able to go back to college. I had some education, in college before, but I had, dropped out. And so I knew that the program was directly, in partnership with the Evergreen State College, but I lived in Eastern Washington. So I really started to create this plan and really reached out to SPP and all of the people in the network that I had built. And I just started to say, this is what I want to do, right? I want to go to school at Evergreen. I have to do a big move. So I did move from Eastern Washington all the way to Western Washington, and then just really set up a lot of the reentry barriers that people face, which is housing, employment, right, that come with an extra barrier once you have a criminal record. But I really used the people that I knew that I had built and just reached out for help. And then I did my undergrad at Evergreen. And then I also after decided to pursue more education, and I finished my master's degree in public administration last year, in June of last year. Yeah. And I currently, thank you. I currently work at as I said, at the Office of the Corrections Ombuds, and like I said, basically my area of focus right now is where I work is some gender equity and reentry. So any policies and work that exists within DOC that are in those areas, I look at basically the complaints that come into me and try to investigate and seek remedy, that can happen in very like a DOC system like this, where there is remedies for them to try to pursue their complaint with DOC, but sometimes it doesn't happen for any amount of reasons. And then I basically come in and try to seek resolution for these individuals and these complaints. We also do systemic, work as well over time of these systems, that are not working currently. Yeah, I'm thinking about pursuing more education and applying for a PhD program, but that's just the next step possibly. So.
Okay, so while I was at work release, which is sort of that period before you're finally released from incarceration, I applied for a lot of different jobs, and in sort of the administrative business operations world, because that was my experience, and ran into a lot of roadblocks because I was a felon. And so then I had heard a presentation by Fair Start while I was at Mission Creek, and I actually knew about Fair Start. So I decided to go ahead and enroll into their culinary program while I was still at work release. And I started out there, and then I went on to manage a restaurant, and then I returned to Fair Start a year and a half after I had left Mission Creek, and I managed our flagship restaurant. So in Fair Start, as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to help those who have barriers to employment by teaching them a skill, which is culinary. We not only have a culinary class, we also have what we call wraparound services. We provide them with counseling if they need housing. We provide them with housing. We give them stipends to purchase clothes or hygiene. We do whatever we can to support them during the 16-week program so that they can be successful. And so pre-COVID, so part of part of Fair Start's mission is also to feed our community. So we've always fed our community. We provide meals for a lot of different organizations between schools and medical facilities within King County. We serve meals at DSC. That's the only place that we actually serve the meals. The rest of the places we just deliver. During COVID, we really concentrated our focus on feeding those in need. And I believe we surpassed 3.5 million meals since COVID started. So every year, every day, thousands and thousands of meals are prepared by our staff, and we send them out. We've also decided to revamp our culinary program, because at pre-COVID, it was an unpaid 16-week program that our students went through, and then they graduated, and then we helped them find jobs. But we decided that we were going to restructure that and have just the teaching part be school, and then the actual working part be an internship program. So our students will get paid for that time. And then we're also looking at different parts of the food service industry, from front of house to management, and having different tracks so that individuals can pursue the track that best suits them, and not just be a chef. So lots of different things and a lot of different programs. I recently moved from managing the restaurant to our consulting division, and our consulting division works with organizations worldwide. We take our expertise and help them either improve their current culinary training or start a culinary training. We've also discovered that there's more than just a culinary training. We might help them start a social enterprise, whether it's catering, a food truck, or any of those types of environments within the food service industry, and then teaching some of our students who want entrepreneurial practice so they can start their own business. Lots of different ways in which we can support our students so that they will no longer have barriers to employment. And right now we're focusing a lot on BIPOC organizations and those furthest from resources, and really honing in on providing them pro bono services so that they can create their own program. And again, teach students or individuals really how to, as the founder of Fair Start, you can give someone a fish and they'll eat for a day, or you can teach them a skill and then they can feed themselves for the rest of their life. So so Fair Start is really is not just a job for me, it's part of my passion to really help individuals who have barriers to employment really take that next step. And I'm hoping that between Fair Start and SPP, we can have something similar, a similar program within the prison system, because they do have, they do have cooking in the culinary and prisons, and you have gardens. So why not mesh the two together? We work with a lot of BIPOC farmers and glean a lot of farms in our effort to keep costs down so that we can feed more individuals. And so I think that those two would just be a really good merger. But yeah, and I volunteer and support SGP because I feel like this is a really valuable program, and I want to continue to do my part to help, because I've benefited so much from my time with SPP and the butterfly programs, and I want to continue to see you flourish.
Thank you so much, Liz and Carolina. I am so moved by who you both are as members of our community. So I think you both have talked a bit about some of the barriers and what has been helpful as you transition from prison. I don't know if you have anything more you want to say about that. You both touched on it already, but is there anything you want this audience to know about what those barriers are, what worked, what didn't work, and what do we need to know to help improve that as a community?
I think the biggest issue is really as I myself have really changed my viewpoint of someone who was formerly incarcerated. So that's really the change that has to happen with employers. Employers really need to not stick a label that you're a felon and automatically assume that you're not hireable or you don't have the skills or any of those things. And so the question is, how do we do that? Because it's such a big issue. I think there's, as being part of the consulting department, it's part of in my outreach. I know that there's lots of organizations out there who are really focusing on changing the narrative. Because until we change the narrative, the stigma will always be there, and that those barriers will still exist no matter what we do. Because we can do everything we can while we're incarcerated and give as much support as we can, but if we can't change an employer's viewpoint, then these incarcerated people will always have difficulty getting a job or renting a place or any of those barriers. And that's the barrier to success.
Yeah, and I want to, really touch on what Liz is saying. What we're talking about here is employment and housing. These are very foundational necessities and needs for all people, right? People need these things to survive. And so when you are, you've been away for so long in a prison and then you come out and then you're just expected to just, do everything again and without any of these supports, it's not realistic and it's not working. And specifically about what Liz was speaking about, I've done a lot of the policy work, right? I also do a lot of that work when we go to the legislature, right? And we try to push for all these bills. And I do a lot of focus on, right, formerly and incarcerated peoples. And we've tried to put, housing justice bill, right, to take, these barriers away from, the landlords, right, and all of this stuff. And it's just really difficult because the mindset is very, right, people think that, we are just all people that have been incarcerated and we're bad people. Like there's a lot of toxic narrative that needs to be, worked on there. And also in the same way with employers. I look at that from different government agencies because I currently work in a government agency. And so I know at least here in 2008, we started to make a dent, right? The place that I work at actually advertises and says that they want people with lived experience. And, and it even puts you right at a different level than all of the rest of the applicants. And so been looking at a lot of government agencies, but there's a lot of them that have still those barriers where, like example, anytime you're working with vulnerable communities, right? Then there's an extra layer of barrier, like Department of Health, DSHS, right? I look at all those things and we have to get away from that somehow. There has to be ways to implement policies and also just changing the narrative, as Liz was saying. So yes.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you want this group to know about your experience before we shift to the questions and facilitated discussion? No. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I know that that's, it's a lot and it's a gift that you share that with us. Thank you. So I want to turn it over to Karen and Emily to help facilitate our facilitated discussion and also invite questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks, Karen and Stacy and Kelly, for your presentations, and Carolina and Liz for sharing your experiences. We're so lucky to work with you, all of you, and yeah, just appreciate it. Well, I know we have at least one question in the chat ready to go, and then I do have a list of other questions I posed earlier that if anybody has any thoughts on, or if you just want to ask any further questions from anybody on this group, please feel free to either throw it in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up, and we can do it that way too. But Karen, do you want to say anything before we launch into the question?
Just wanted to say that you've put some really great starter questions in the chat if you want to pay attention to that, and let's have some good, rich discussion.
Wonderful. Well, I see the first question from Ruth is, are there any programs in prisons on the east side, like Pennsylvania or East Coast, like Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, that are doing ecological conservation work? Wonder if Karen or Kelly have any thoughts on that, or Stacy?
So I'll jump in to start, and there might even be people on this call that can help better inform that. I want to find, other people that are doing this work. I know of a program that was in Ohio for a while. They were working with a species of salamander, the hellbender it's called. I think that program is no longer, but I will point that Ohio has quite a few different science sustainability education programs. And then there's a really great program in Pennsylvania that I want to call attention to, even though it's not conservation work directly. There's some colleagues who started an arboriculture certification program. For those of you who don't know, arboriculture is about caring for our urban forests. It's really important in a time of climate change. So while it might not always be about native species, I think that's another really cool program to look to in your area. And then I wonder about, what others know. Those are the two that come to mind for me.
Well, and one thing that I sort of think about when I think about this from a conservation perspective too, is the funding for places in the West has been a little bit easier, I think, than it has been for places in the East. I just think about the many governmental lands that are present in the West through BLM. And, fortunately for us who live here in the West, funding streams have been a little easier than they might be back East.
And Matt, I don't know if you have anything more to add. I know you're based in Boston. You might know of some of the work that our East Coast colleagues are doing better than those of us here in the West.
I guess not specifically to point to now, but if, that is one thing on the Ecologies of Justice website. There's a form to fill out. You can put your email in and get connected to a list of people from the conference that you could even put a question like that out to, like, hey, is there anyone doing this in my state? So yeah, that'd be a great place to connect with that. So
I should have mentioned too that, and I don't want to speak for Karen or Stacy, but I think this is probably true for you as well, but we are happy to share resources. We are happy to share information about some of the successes and challenges and lessons learned along the way, procedures, protocols, all of that. And I'm mindful that every state's a little bit different, every prison's a little bit different, which makes it really challenging. But there are some lessons that I feel like our team has learned over the years about this work that we would love to share. This isn't about, I feel like, yeah, the more we can bring education and connection with nature into prison, the better.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I concur, absolutely. But one thing I was thinking about when Ruth asked the question is, I'm not really sure from what standpoint you're asking the question, Ruth. Are you interested in starting a program in the East? Can you help us understand that? Or if you would like to, ask more, that's fine. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah, I'm mostly exploring the idea of starting a gardening program, but this other context of sustainability is one I hadn't thought about. So but I am married to an ecologist. So between the two of us, I think we could come up, these ideas are really, I think the garden program could be combined maybe in some way with possibly, raising butterflies and so forth. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I see another question has popped in the chat from Ian. It says, do you have any recommendations on how to synergize the conceptual foundations and discoveries of your programs and experiences with programs sorry, keeps moving up on me, not directly related to environmental efforts in connection with the carceral system? And secondly, in a similar vein of questioning, how would you suggest collaborating with your programs or implementing conservation into the same organizations which do not currently encompass the focus on natural connections and education?
So
That's a lot.
Big question.
So Ian, I wonder if you're willing to say more about the first part, because I tend to be like step one. And then, so I mean, as I'm looking at part one, I think you're saying you're talking about education that's not environmental based, or are we not even talking about education? Can you say more if you're willing, or if you have good internet?
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
So the first part, I was just wondering because the second one focuses more on, say, direct collaboration of ideas and programs. The first one is more just based on what you've learned throughout your work. How could that potentially be applied to, organizations or groups who aren't, directly involved with, say, the ecological collaborative element with, carceral work? But what lessons kind of still fall into working within that system and dealing with the less optimal elements of working in that system, helping to benefit those who are currently incarcerated or have been incarcerated in that sense.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. That helps me at least. I mean, I guess I would say that, I feel like part of my my education at Evergreen. So I'm an alum from this institution and now work here. And part of what our academic institution is founded on, I feel like has helped prepare me for this work. So part of it is about working across differences and removing barriers. So I really bought into those ideas and really try to bring that to this work. So there's plenty of differences we encounter as we're working within the prison system, or even with partners, with external partners. I try to navigate that with respect, consistent compassion, which I'm not saying is always an easy thing for me, but because there are times when if I'm coming up against a difference, my inclination might be to, make them wrong, or, but I'm really trying to be consistent in my compassion for all people that are impacted by this system, whether living in it, working in it, or misunderstanding it from the outside, trying to, come at it from an education approach and with respect for everyone. It was easier for me to relate to the folks that are on the incarceration side of this. I have family members who have been incarcerated. I found that easier to relate to. In my growing journey through this work, I've also found that I needed to, that part of my growth was around thinking about the staff that also work in that system. The more I learned about the impact that system has on them, I feel like, gosh, all the more reason for us to completely change the way that our justice system functions. Correction staff have incredibly high rates of PTSD. They also deal with a lot of addiction issues, premature death. So this is also a system that's not good to work in, not good to live in, not good to work in. And so all the more reason to bring change. So I would say that coming with those values and knowing that you're going to encounter a lot of differences. And, I also want to say that I think that I take an all ingredients approach. I understand having anger toward the system. I understand, I understand that. And our approach has been to work within and to try to, like I say, be compassionate and consistent in our compassion for everyone, and to find common ground where we can. We've found that has opened a lot of doors for us. We have built up a lot of trust with correction staff. Carlina talked about those early days. She was so crucial to helping us build that program in the first days. And I know she's had a chance to go back, but it's a much different situation there now, where we get tremendous support. And it's because the staff are also benefiting from having those butterflies there. I'll just really quickly say, a couple of weeks ago, I got to go deliver some butterflies, which I don't usually get to do, but it was a weekend, they were ready, and I was the one available. So I took them up, and the staff there on the weekends are very short staffed. They were very hectic. They were very stressed out, and they were trying to accommodate me. And they came to let me in the door and they were like, do you have butterflies? And they were all kind of shy about it. And I was like, how do you want to see? And they're like, we can see. It's like, of course, this is your program too. So we pulled out the butterflies and we showed them, and it was amazing, you know, and then bringing them to the women that were out in the program waiting for them. They were so excited. I felt like a rock star. Here I am with this cooler of butterflies, you know. And anyway, I just mean to say that, like, finding some way to relate to the folks that are within that system so that you can try to create the change you're trying to create. That's my 2 cents.
I think that's a lovely response. You know, at the end of the day, I think we are all connected by one major thing that we often don't think that we belong to, and that thing is nature. You know, learning to accept ourselves for who we are with our frailties, our issues, our experiences is, I think, a very, very important thing. And for me personally, I'm an ethnobotanist, so I really love thinking about people and cultures and plants and how everybody relates differently to nature in some way, shape, or form. But for me, this program is really important because of that reason, because it does help us connect with nature and have that same commonality throughout. It gives us a substrate to work with. You know, no matter what, conflict resolution, I think, comes into play with it. Stacy mentioned that earlier as one of the trainings that was done. And I think that's also very important, because not only is there conflict in prison situations, but there's also conflict out there with regard to the natural world, you know, and our use of it and overuse of it. So I'm happy to be working in the program towards some positive ends, I hope.
I wonder if anyone else has anything to add to that, like especially for those Carlina and Liz with the lived experience. I don't know if there's anything that you would want to add to what we've already said. Okay, I'm seeing a no from Carlina. Liz, was there anything? No, okay. So go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add one of the few things that I feel like I've learned from working in prison education programs and all sorts of different prisons is just the need and the value of being flexible and just willing to kind of bend with whatever is going with the flow for that day or that year or that week. Seems to be like a must-have for working in prisons. And I feel like that goes on whatever side, like if you're working at the prison, if you're a DOC employee, or if you're working on the outside as a partner, just understanding that things don't always go as you hope they're going to go, and how willing are you to be flexible with them. Yeah, I wondered if Stacy had anything else to add to it too, or we could try to tackle the second part of the question.
I'll just mention, I think conferences like this are so helpful. And I've had people from back east contact me personally asking about these programs. And so we've now had dialogue, so it's neat sharing. And if people want to if they're in the area, come and be one of our speakers and come into the prison and see how we're running our various programs. So we invite you to join us in any way you can.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Stacy. Well, shall we try to tackle the second part of Ian's question? Okay, and so that is, how would you suggest collaborating with your programs or implementing conservation into those same organizations that don't currently encompass the natural connections to and education? So I wonder if Karen and Kelly have any thoughts?
Well, I'm mindful that we're running short on time, and I'm hoping that part of what we provided in that answer hopefully gets at some of that. I don't know if that feels successful, Ian, but I do see that many of us put our emails in the chat. Also welcome anyone to connect with us so that we could talk more. There are a lot of resources on the Sustainability in Prisons Project website as well. And we're always trying to make things, easily accessible and available. I know Stacy and Karen also have great resources on their website that are available to folks. Does it feel okay? Because I know I think we have 4 minutes remaining.
Yeah, I would love it if we maybe could tackle the question about any barriers that Liz, Carolina, and others have faced. That seems to me to be a great way to end.
Yeah, so the question then is, what, if any, barriers prevented Liz, Carolina, and others to continue working in conservation, to continue in conservation work, or was the goal largely to develop other transferable skills and not so much take a career as a conservationist?
I think for me, it was probably more of the transferable skills, although I did get a job offer from the Oregon Zoo if I wanted to go work at the Oregon Zoo. But realistically, my family is here in Seattle and I live in Seattle. So that was not possible for me. But everything I've learned in the program, I use today in my current role. So while I might not be in conservation, I might do conservation work as a volunteer. I still benefited from a lot of things I learned as a technician.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree with Liz. I think directly correlated, what I learned in the program helped me do, like, that was the foundational piece to building everything I've been able to do with, succeeding, especially like in re-entry. And of course, as Liz too, I think at the time there was a barrier, like Oregon Zoo was more than willing to hire us, but there was a barrier with the zoo in Seattle, I think, at the time. I don't know if that still currently exists or not, but it was around, having criminal background, right? So I think, yeah, those things, like pretty much like Liz said. And, of course, people that are coming out of incarceration need to have, right, a sustainable living, right, wage. And so that's where we focus around making it streamlined so people can be connected, right? If they're doing and learning these skills, then be able to actually also, right, make it a career. Why not? And I think especially for people coming out of incarceration, a lot of the focus is sometimes people don't want to pursue education because that's not something that's going to give you right here, right now, money, right? And people do need to survive and sustain their families. And so, yeah.
Thank you for that, both of you. I'm really encouraged by the chatter today and the further discussion that's taken place also in the chat. But I should just put a plug in for the in-person session. We will be having that fairly shortly. You'll see that on the Ecology of Justice page, easy enough. But we would love to continue this conversation there if you all are able to attend. And also, please do follow up with me. And I'm sure any of my colleagues who've posted their emails here too. We're happy to help in any way that we can. But we also, I know, want to hear your voices and hear your experiences so we can all work toward better ends.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all the presenters today. This was a really wonderful first session for us. And another way to continue the conversation too is, in fact, it's a great kind of transition because next week at the same time, we'll be hearing the Inside Garden Program staff and others discussing cultivating reentry success for women from the inside out. And that'll be at the same time next week, and in some ways, a great place to continue the conversation. So again, thank you so much to our presenters today, and really appreciate you all. And we'll hope to see all or many of you back with us next week at the same time. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.